what I wanted to do theoretically in my head was I was going to read Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky. I
Okay, yeah.
think I butchered the name, and then have you on because I know like you've read that book, and then you also read a lot of his other works, and then pick your brain. But if I remove this Animal Collective vinyl, you'll see it's still in the queue right
Uh,
here.
you haven't read it yet.
So if you can enlighten me a little bit about what you think of Dostoevsky.
Dostoevsky.
Yes. I
Very
read
good.
Notes from the Underground. That's the only book I've read from it.
Okay, great book.
Yeah. Yeah. Why it seems like you kind of gravitate towards his writing.
I've always gravitated towards the psychological. So I'm a big anime
Yeah.
fan, as you know, and my favorite anime has always been around by a director named Satoshi Kon. Satoshi
Okay.
Kon directed a movie called Paprika, and another movie called Millennium Actress, and a movie called Perfect Blue. All of these have psychological themes. And he also
Okay.
directed a show, a 13 episode series called Paranoia Agent, which has psychological themes. And I got into his stuff when I was like 15. So I've always been drawn to the psychological aspect, the human nature side of fiction.
Mm-hmm.
And so Dostoevsky is like that. He's not a psychologist. He never was a trained psychologist. And so he's a great example, I think, of, oh, stay in your lane. You're not a
Yeah.
psychologist.
Yeah.
You write about psychology. You read Crime and Punishment, and it is an expose of the of what happens to a soul who believes that they can get away with murder and the consequences of that, the psychological consequences of what happens to your conscience when you trick yourself into thinking that you're going to get away with a crime. Oh, well, there's no such thing as morality, or like you can play these psychological games on yourself, which you
Mm-hmm.
see in Crime and Punishment. I'm not going to spoil the book, by the way, but the whole gist of the book is, well, the main character tries to convince himself that he can get away with murder, and the whole entire book is what happens afterwards. And that's what you get out of Crime and Punishment. And I think it's a very useful read for people who are teetering on the edge of nihilism, who think like who might be taking Nietzsche's Superman idea a bit too seriously, which is what the Nazis did by transcending all morals. Therefore, everything is permitted, to use a phrase that Dostoevsky uses in another one of his novels, The Brothers Karamazov. If everything is permitted, then all hell breaks loose and we can just go commit murders because, morality is this transcendent, like this thing that we can transcend, and we don't need the psychological chains tying ourselves to morality. We can do whatever we want. And then consciousness is going to come in and say, no, 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 there's a reason why I exist, and it's to keep you really alive and to kind of impose order on your world. And Dostoevsky explores the relationship between morality and consciousness itself and Orthodox Christian ideas. And what he'll do is he'll strongman arguments in the flesh of his characters. So, and he'll strongman arguments that he disagrees with. And what you do in a good debate is to try to strongman the idea that you're arguing against, so you don't dilute the idea and straw man it, which is the opposite of steel manning is actually the proper word, not strongman.
Wait, what are all
Steel
these
manning it.
words?
He'll
What
steel
all
man
these
the.
words be?
What's up?
The like straw man, steel man. What does that mean?
To steel man something means to actually give as much credit as you possibly can to the argument on the other side. So it's
Okay.
like, let's say you, Rich, say, argument A, and I disagree with that. What I want to do, if I want to have a productive debate, is try to understand your point of view as strongly as I can and to not dilute your argument. I want to make it as strong as I possibly can, which will force me to increase the level of my argument, the strength of my argument, instead of straw manning it by
It seems
weakening.
like a good approach. Good approach,
Yeah,
right?
and that's what Dostoevsky will do with his characters. So
Okay.
he does this in Brothers Karamazov. He'll steel man the argument against faith and the Christian faith and the Christian Orthodox faith through a character in the book, and then he'll straw man um, his argument for believing in God in the guise of a character. Huxley did this as well. Huxley, all of
Dude,
great
Huxley's my guy. I I brought Perennial Philosophy. Where is this book? With me to
I haven't read that one
Miami.
yet.
So I took perennial philosophy with me to Miami.
Yeah.
I'm reading in Miami. I can only read like 3 pages of it at a time because I have to like step back and like, what did I just read? And then
Yeah.
so that led me to Eyeless and Gaza. And then I've been on Wikipedia, like looking him up, listening to podcast episodes about his biography.
Uh-huh.
Fascinating person.
Yeah, did a lot of LSD.
But he didn't do it till he was like 55, right?
It's great. Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
Well,
so that
not that he
reminds
didn't do it
me.
until he was 55, because unearned wisdom, right? He warned about taking LSD and psilocybin not seriously enough because you have one or two bad trips and that's really going to fuck you up psychologically. So he treated it with respect. But
Okay.
what Aldous Huxley and Dostoevsky did similarly was philosophical literature. Instead of having this, like, it's a little bit different than what Nietzsche did, though Nietzsche did the same thing too with Zarathustra. But they meditated on philosophical and spiritual, like psychological ideas. Those two words are, I think, interchangeable. Through characters and through fiction, so that way they're a little bit more palatable for most people.
Mm-hmm.
So you
Interesting.
think, oh, the masses shouldn't have philosophy because they don't understand. They're not smart enough for philosophy. I think that idea is very toxic. I think it's bullshit. Like, just because you're not an academic doesn't mean you can't appreciate philosophy and deep ideas. I
Yeah.
don't see myself as some pompous academic. I just want to understand myself on a deeper level. I have this quote that goes, I'm quoting myself. How narcissistic is that? A great work of literature knows more about you than you do.
Ooh. So I read, that brings me to this one. I'm reading Working Class Mystic,
That's a great name.
right?
George Harrison.
Spiritual biography of George Harrison.
Okay.
Huge Beatles fan.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
uh
Yeah.
and so the other day I read his experience taking LSD for the first time.
Mm.
So they were with it was John and George and Cynthia Lennon and then Patty, and they were over at their dentist's house. So their dentist was like a dentist, but he was so like fun that he had all these rock star friends. So
Yeah.
that uh they had coffee and there's like 4 sugar cubes on the mantle, the fireplace mantle, and he spiked them into the coffee, and then they were about to go out to the club, and he's
Uh-huh.
like, "No, we can't go anywhere." So then at first, John was the only one who knew about LSD of the Beatles, and then he was furious that, which rightly so, like you take an LSD and you don't even,
Right.
like. And then George, they were having like a really bad experience. Then George, they went to the club and they met up with Ringo and Mick Jagger, and then George started seeing everything in molecules and
Oh my God.
atoms,
Yeah.
and he would see a tree and he would see the sap running through it, and then it was that experience that he knew in his mind that there was God, and then ever since he's been like he went on this spiritual journey to find it. And I was thinking of you because I remember you were reading not about the LSD but the Bhagavad Gita, that
Yeah.
book. I remember you mentioned it like a while ago.
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. 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 I need to read it again because I don't
What
remember
did
a
you
whole.
think of that book?
I remember enjoying it because I was going into it thinking that it would be a little bit impenetrable, because there's a lot of
Yeah.
ancient wisdom out there that's very difficult to get your head under, but it was very readable. I don't know
Was
if it was
it?
because of the trends. Oh yeah, I found it very readable and very clear, very clearly written. Yeah, which is why I recommend it
Yeah.
highly. I think, yeah, Dostoevsky's work is kind of like that too. I think it's very readable, but that's like the surprise of it was that, I could get my head around this. If an
Yeah.
adult like me could understand this.
Yeah. I love books where if you read a book that resonates with you, you can extract like 5 more books from it. So
Hmm.
I'm reading the Working Class Mystic, and then it leads me to like now I got this Raja Yoga, and like I bought Tibetan Book of the Dead, like all these different books,
I haven't read that one.
and just have it accessible. Like I'm building up this library here.
I
So
can see that. Yeah,
yeah,
that's what a book does. You finish reading a book, and then now you have this new inkling as to what you want to read next based on what you just read. And you
yeah,
didn't know what you wanted to read next before you started reading that book you just
right,
finished. And now you have more of a sense of that. And like, that's the question, like, well, what should I read first? Like, do you have 5 books that I should read? No, I don't, because I don't know what you're going to be interested in after you finish
exactly,
reading one of them.
exactly, yeah,
I have no idea.
You just got to follow
recommend.
your curiosity.
Yeah, 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 exactly. Follow your curiosity. Like, I do think that there's a lot of books that everybody should read, like Search for Meaning and Gulag Archipelago and like Huxley and all that. But it's very hard for me to say that, like, oh, I'm going to go door to door and say, you need to read this right
Yeah.
now. Who am I to say that? I don't know.
Yeah.